Okay, the Hangout is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we are talking about Episode 11 of Survivor David Vs Goliath. And, we're closing in on Endgame. Things are getting tight and tense. Things are shifting constantly. I got spoiled on the episode, but well, that's what happens when you're on vacation and are not able to watch the episode promptly. And it was just a trivial sort of thing. It was just on Twitter, someone was promoting, their interview with Gabby, and I'm like, well, shit, I know what that means. So, it was still interesting to watch the episode just to see it play out. Although from, knowing who was going to go and having seen the preview, it seemed pretty clear what was likely to happen, which is, since lots of other people would be interested in voting Christian off, her trying to make that happen, him playing his idol, but why her as a target to go? That's where I wasn't sure. Would it be because Christian knew and organized a counter hit, or is it something else? Turned out something else.
Yeah, my fan's not working. Yes, It turned out to be something else. That's correct.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting, actually. I got the impression from that scene. Now, maybe they thought it through more thoroughly, but from that scene, it seemed like they decided to do that almost because it was funny that they would do that to her when she came to them with this plan. Like, to have her be the backup, even though she approached them to say
I thought it was more that they wanted to make sure that one of the two of them was gone no matter what, so that they couldn't reconnect and still be a duo.
Right. They did want to get Christian out, knew it was a possibility that he could play an idol. And then, so if it has to be someone else, well, Allison had been a target previously, but she was also in on this plan, so would not want to be the one. So I guess who else would it be? But I think that's where ultimately, Gabby, I don't even want to say she miscalculated. I mean, I think that she did what she needed to do for the game, and it didn't work out this time. But I don't know that she made any huge blunders.
No, and I didn't see any of the interviews with her afterwards, but just it seemed by the way that she went into the vote and the way that she kind of laughed when it happened to her, that she knew it was a possibility. I don't think she thought it was going to be this time.
Yeah.
But she knew that by coming out from hiding, quote unquote, behind Christian, that she was putting herself in more danger, but she knew that if she just worked behind Christian, she couldn't beat him.
Right. So it was a calculated risk of saying, she didn't come here to play for second place.
Right.
And good for her. I mean, obviously it didn't work out. And so, we've talked about that in the past, in the sense of, if you judge a plan by the results, then it would be a bad plan. But I think it's a plan that might have worked under other circumstances, because even Christian, as shrewd as he is, still needed Davy's heads up that Gabby was working against him. He might not have picked up on it otherwise, because he even still had a hard time believing it when Davy told him straight up.
Right. It took not only Davy's heads up, but it also took him, staring people down in tribal council to try to get a feeling, which I think made the difference for him. I think that, as well as he knows Gabby, whatever, looking at her, kind of searching her soul or whatever, she probably tipped it a little bit. And, Davy sort of tipped it with that, did you see when Christian looked back at him and he pretended to look behind him like Christian was looking at somebody behind him? But I think that was kind of a nod to it of like, hey man, I'm not going to tell you what's happening. Like, I'm not going to be the one that like gave it all away. Like, I told you were in danger, but you got to make your own decision. Like, I felt like that was what that indicator was like, but I'm not going to lie to you either. So I'm just going to kind of look away, and
well, I mean, from Davy's perspective though, he pretty much did tell him they're going to try to get you. And
I tell him that, but he clearly let him believe that Allison was a legit target for him.
Oh, didn't tell him about it being Gabby instead. But I mean, I don't know that Christian would.
He never flat out told him to use his idol. Right. He gave him the initial heads up and then didn't give him any more indication after that. And I think that's what we saw there in the tribal council is like a furthering of that. Like, hey man, that's all you get. You got the initial heads up. You got to make your own decision. Like, I think that's what that was indicating.
That's interesting. That wasn't how I took it. I took it as Davy was genuinely trying to say, look, she's working against you. She's telling people that she's going to go after you. And I know you're saying you have a hard time believing it, but I mean, you either believe me or you don't. So I can't push any harder than that. But I think that Davy was sincerely trying to say, no, you are in trouble. You should play your idol. But Christian is trying to gauge whether this is a ploy to flush his idol when he doesn't really need to.
Right.
Because the idea of him having such a close ally in Gabby and having the others want to split them up is also plausible. So he's maybe thinking, is that what this is? Whereas I think Davy basically decided to say, I am still pretending with the others that I'm on board with their plan, but I'm giving you the heads up. And so I think to the extent that he's play acting anything in that tribal council, it's to the others that he doesn't want them to know he gave Christian the tip.
Interesting. Well, here's the reason why I took it differently. I took the initial one the same way you did. But then I was like thinking through it. I want to say logically, but I don't want to say like the way you looked at it was illogical. I mean, just fair. I was walking through it. Is that there are 8 of them. They needed at least a 5 majority to vote for Allison clean. Christian believed that existed. So that would have had to have been Gabby, Nick. Davy would have had to have been a part of that. So Davy was allowing him to think it was Allison cleanly after his initial warning and not continuing to harp on him that you need to use your idol. Yeah, because he couldn't say we're all voting for Allison, but you should use your idol just in case. Like, that's why I think that Davy let it go. He gave him the initial warning and then played it completely the other way. And that's why he didn't want to give Christian. I think your part is, I think he was, now that you've said that, I think he was playing to both in that he didn't want the others to know he tipped him, but he also didn't want to give Christian any more indication.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is what happened in the episode that contradicts the idea that Davy told Christian straight up, Gabby's plotting against you. You need to play your idol. And Christian was concerned because he doesn't want to give up his idol when he knows he's a target if he doesn't actually have to. So he's trying to get a sense of what's going on, especially because he's aware Gabby has been at his side the whole time. He trusts her, and he is potentially trusts her more than he trusts Davy. So he's not, for Davy to come and say she's working against you, he's not sure he believes that.
Right. I totally agree with that. What I'm saying is, like, by the way, the Christian's certainty until he like looked around at everybody, engaged it, that Davy couldn't have had another conversation with him after that, and they all thought they were voting for Allison. And so somewhere along the line, like, Davy didn't keep hammering the point home. Like, I agree with you that he made it very clear that Christian should use his idol, but something happened where Christian still felt like he didn't need to, and that everybody was voting for Allison, even though no one was voting for Allison.
I'm not sure that you may be right, but I'm not sure that that explains what we saw any better, because the idea that he did that last minute thing doesn't mean that he really wasn't sure. It probably means to me, what it looks like is he was pretty sure he knew he was going to have to use it. He was hoping he wouldn't have to. And he wanted a final gut check on everything, because right there in the moment when Probst asks if anyone's going to play an idol, he knows that's when the tension, if people are really targeting him, he knows that's when the tension is going to be the highest. And so that's when he wants to interrupt and look around to see who looks scared that he might play an idol. And if he looks around and he sees people going, then he knows, oh, yeah, well, I guess I have to. Whereas if he sees people just looking like bewildered, like, what? Then he knows that they were not thinking about voting for him and concerned whether he had an idol or not. So I think he was just doing a last minute gut check. It doesn't mean he really didn't think he needed to use it until then.
That makes sense.
That was my take, but, you might be right too. It's hard to know how sure he was, because I think, we saw him in the confessional earlier where he was saying, I'm prepared to use it, but I don't want to use it. And I think that that's just what it is, because without it, he's in trouble now. So to have to play your idol because you would have been voted out otherwise, and to now not have it, going back to camp with all the same people who just tried to vote you out, he's in a really tough spot. He would prefer to not have had to use his idol if he didn't really have to. And it may even, I don't know that he knew that it was going to be, I think he was just relying on, I'm not sure what he thought was happening, but I think he just figured if everybody voted for him and it wasn't split, then his Allison vote sends Allison home. Doesn't mean he thinks that everybody else was voting for Allison.
Right. Or there's even another interpretation is that he believed, going off of what you're saying, that he knew that it was a possibility to have to use his idol. Didn't want to. He could have thought that there were others with him who were willing to vote, who were going to vote for Allison. It just would not be the majority. And that he would still be joining them, which is what makes, I think where Mike and Angelina's plan, why it works so well, because to your point, Christian now goes back to camp with all the people that voted for him. Without his number one ally. Granted, she worked against him, but the way that things shift, had this gone down the other way and Allison gone home, like Gabby might have been like, well, shit, that was close. Like maybe I shouldn't try that again unless I'm sure, and worked with him, and now he doesn't have that option. So like, who does he go to right now? Because everybody that's left is against him unless he somehow is an asset to them to move one more vote at some point, he's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Whereas potentially with Gabby coming back and feeling a little like defeated, he could have regained that trust and they could have worked together. Whereas now Mike and Angelina have taken that off the table. The other thing, just thinking about the others, and so here's the other thing that I was thinking is, unless the rest of them thought that Mike and Angelina were voting for Allison, like I couldn't imagine that though, because Allison would have had to know. If they didn't split the votes, like only Mike and Angelina took it upon themselves to make the vote split. when everyone knew Christian had an idol? Like, did they just think they blindsided him like that badly? Maybe, and that's messed up for them.
I think the other Davids must have told Christian that it was still Allison.
And everyone believed that everyone believed that he was so sure that they didn't think they needed a split vote because he was not going to use his idol.
Well, but they did split the vote, though.
No, well, two went kind of rogue on it.
Well, I mean, maybe, but
we saw that they only discussed it amongst themselves. The rest of them didn't have a plan for a split vote. Two of them took it upon themselves to split the vote.
Yeah, I guess maybe that just doesn't feel right to me because we saw them come up with the idea, but it doesn't feel right to me that the others would have had no plan when they know that it's possible Christian has an idol.
So what did Gabby think was happening?
I think she thought it was Allison otherwise. Or I don't know, okay. I think what Gabby thought was happening is that she didn't know that they were necessarily switching to her. They may have said someone else, who knows? We didn't hear. But I think that she knew she was kind of going all in on this vote. I don't think that means she knew that it would be her otherwise, but I think she knew that it was like all depended on getting Christian out and him not playing his idol.
Yeah, then if that's the case, I mean, then I have to go back and take away some of the credit for her move. If everyone else knew that the vote was being split towards her and she didn't think the vote was being split at all, like, that's an error.
Well, like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's too much that we didn't get shown, is my point.
Yeah, that's why we're discussing the options.
Right. Well, I'm just saying that it doesn't seem right to me that that there wouldn't have been any other plan for split. I think Gabby must have been told that it was someone else other than her. I don't know who it would have been, but
then, yeah, and so, again, we didn't see it, but you still have to, like, think through this, and you're like, if they told Gabby, let's say they told Gabby it's Allison, like, her first question should be, well, who does Allison think it is?
Well, but maybe she asked that and they, I mean, my point is that we don't know because they didn't show us.
I get your point, but I still want to, like, talk through, like, some of these, because it just came down in such a strange way in that, what we saw was like what you said. We see Davey only tell Christian once. We see Christian sure it's going to be Allison one way or the other. Like, what, he thinks that either there's a minority voting for Allison and that he needs to use his idol, or that they're secure in the majority. He's not sure. Then you have I guess no, I have my note. Nick was there too to talk about the vote splitting. And that's how they knew for sure he had the idol, because Nick told them. But we never saw them talk with any of the rest of them about it. But you have to think, like, they must have had a conversation about that. And if they did, like, it's just curious what they told to Gabby and Allison. Like, and again, we can't be sure, but it's like, it's odd that Gabby didn't seem to think, like, I mean, again, we don't know, but it's just, it feels like some people must have felt like there was no split vote, or that the vote was split to somebody else. And, and it just seems like so I guess where I'm coming from is they either played really well in that they had both Gabby and Allison believing that there was a split vote the other way. Like, because again, let's just say for argument's sake that Allison is who Gabby's being told that it is. Yeah. And they're telling Gabby, oh no, we're telling Gabby that it's Davey or whatever, so that she doesn't suspect. So they play it so well. Or a number of them actually played it poorly in not trying to split the vote and letting Mike and Angelina decide it's Gabby without their knowledge. And maybe we'll see when they come back from tribal, like how comfortable everybody is and what happened. I guess we should probably just leave it at that. Now that we'll either know, like, hey, shit, guys, how'd you guys know to, like, that he had an idol and to split off, or it'll be like, hey, that worked. Yeah. Thanks for not telling her, Allison.
I think what seems the most likely to me is that The plan A was everybody but Christian wanted Christian out. But because there was an awareness that he might have an idol, they knew they needed to split. And so the real plan for everybody except Gabby was to have Gabby be the backup. But Gabby had to have been told it was someone else, and all they would have had to say is wouldn't have had to be Allison. It could have been Davey or Nick or Kara.
Right. They could have said, "Hey, it's Kara," and if she said, "What are you telling Kara?" "Oh, we're telling her it's Allison because that's who's Christian's targeting."
Yeah, I mean I think that's all that they would have had to say.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess we'll just, like I said, I think maybe we should leave that. I mean, it was
yeah, it's hard to know because there's definitely a missing piece of the conversation.
And hopefully now that, like I said, now that we've talked through it, hopefully we'll get some clarity when they return from tribal council at the beginning of next episode, because we'll see how people react to what happened.
Well, and if either of us had read any like interview with Gabby, she might have said too. So we could have done that research, but oh well.
Instead, we just speculated.
Yeah. Oh well. Let's jump back up to
the episode then. Sorry, you were saying that.
Yeah. So we started off the episode with Nick and the title of the episode quote saying that Gabby and Christian are so smart that they're dumb. And he's very frustrated because, we know that Nick and Davey didn't get told about the plan to get rid of Carl because they were allies with Carl. And they would probably be opposed to the plan if they were told. They could not be trusted to not tell Carl because they probably would have disagreed with the plan. And so Nick is angry not only because he didn't get told, but also because he would have disagreed.
Right.
And
so not only did he not get told, but what a thing he didn't want to have happen happened.
Right, exactly. And so he's pretty mad, and he is essentially just saying Mason and Dixon is dead. He doesn't trust Christian anymore. And, it is an interesting position. We have Christian try to repair the damage, which I think is the right move without saying that he was actually wrong to have done it the way he did. Because I think he did need, taking out Carl is it's a move for a reason. They didn't do it arbitrarily. They didn't do it because they didn't like him. Although there was a little bit of an
that's what helped get the problem. Yeah, it was that.
So it helped them decide that now is the time. But the concern was everybody sees Carl as the Godfather. We want to take out the Godfather, and then we have a move that we've claimed, and so we have that. But it does, making moves does attract attention just like it did here. And so from Nick's perspective, we can see why he's upset. But that doesn't necessarily mean Christian and Gabby were wrong to do it.
Right.
Or that they should have told Nick, because he might have messed it up if they had. They were probably right not to tell him if that's what they wanted to do, is get rid of Carl.
Yeah, I think they handled it correctly based on that being what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't have suspected Nick's. I mean, I would say it's a little of an overreaction,
mm-hmm.
To take it in that I now am hell-bent on getting rid of Christian and I will never work with him again, as opposed to I am wary of him and will be aware of opportunities to separate myself from him or get him out of the game,
mm-hmm.
which I think would have been the more measured response.
Yeah. I think Nick was angry and frustrated because his plan got messed up. What he thought he was going to do got disrupted. Doesn't get to do that anymore. He's mad, and he is frustrated that, he saw what he felt was a strong ally do something without telling him. And I get it where the emotion comes from, but I think it was also primarily an emotional response rather than a strategic one.
Agreed.
To be so mad. It did prompt Christian to attempt a reconciliation, though. So, that's, a positive step, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think Christian handled that correctly, and again, I think Nick's reaction was appropriate yet too much to his apology. Like, I think he should have been wary of it. As, okay, well, yeah, I mean, he knows he kind of messed up, and I'm still going to be paying attention to him. Like, we're not all in bros like we were before. But okay, I'm glad he at least acknowledged that, as opposed to, I can't trust anything he says now, so I don't even take his apology. So again, it was appropriate to question his apology as 100% genuine. I think it was an overreaction to say that I'm not even going to acknowledge that it happened because I just want to be mad at him.
Yeah, and it's interesting to the question of the how genuine is the apology, because I think it was completely genuine from one perspective, and yet the apology was always not, I did the wrong thing, but I knew what I was doing was going to hurt you, and I decided to do it anyway. And I do feel bad that it hurt you, right, which is not the same thing as saying I regret my choice.
Right, which is why I think that his reaction was over the top, and that, I believe that because Christian tempered how he said it, that he was able to be 100% honest with Nick, and while still not regretting what he did, he regrets that he put his friend in a position that made him uncomfortable, and he feels empathetic to that. But he still would have made the decision again. He didn't say that that directly, but I mean, it was very, like I said, very tempered, very, very well chosen how he said it. And so this next episode, I think, is really going to make or break Nick's game, because Nick's in a really good spot right now. Like, he's not really targeted. He got himself pretty far. He's got a case at the end. He's a lawyer. He can make a case for himself. Can he, now that the plan to get rid of Christian didn't go through, can he kind of step back and say, okay, hey, we gave it a shot. At least we burned his idol. Not to say he has to work with Christian again, but how he settles into this new chaos that's going to happen, because now there's going to be now pretty much everybody's out for themselves, unless, Christian is just exposed again and they can all rally behind him and he's got no shot. However, that's going to be very tricky to do, as numbers start to cut down,
Well, if it's always, you always take it with a grain of salt, but the preview makes it sound like, everyone's on the chopping block, and we hear Nick, Allison, Christian, Davey all mentioned. And it's possible that that's a red herring, and that it's actually still Christian, and now that he doesn't have an idol, he's doomed unless he wins immunity. That might still be true. But it also might be that having flushed his idol and eliminated what was previously seen as his strongest ally, it might have reduced the threat level in a lot of people's minds. And so they might not be thinking he's the number one threat anymore, and that they should be looking elsewhere.
Right. Or the fact that the immediate threat level of him having the idol being gone, as well as everyone's agreement that he shouldn't be at the end, we're kind of in that gray area of, well, we don't have to do him this vote.
Right.
Because we have plenty of people that don't.
That's what everybody's expecting.
Right. And we have plenty of people next vote if we take somebody else that we think will have trouble getting, like maybe someone who could win challenges at the end, or, whatever. Like, there's a lot of other criteria that can come involved, because you're going to say, well, yeah, but there's still 5 of us can still vote for him next time, and it's not an issue. We'd still even have enough to split votes. You know, so we can go 1 vote. We can deviate for 1 vote.
Yeah.
You know, and so you run into it. And if those cracks exist, like Christian is going to be there to exploit them. I mean, he's very good at this game.
Yeah.
So that's why I said I think, you know, Christian's going to definitely get up and go hunting for an idol. We're going to see how that plays out. He's good at doing it because he's identified how they did it. So that's a wild card that's still in play.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be the threat that he may have found another idol because he's going to look for it. And so someone may catch him going to look for it. And then while they won't definitively know if he has it, they'll also know that he's never going to share that with anybody.
Right. Yeah.
So that kind of exists. And now you've got all these clouds coming in. It's like, well, it's not so easy to get rid of Christian right now because he might have found he was out looking for that idol. And you know what? Like, we do have plenty of people to split votes next time if we just look at this person this time. And then you start having enough of those and some distrust. And, oh, I heard so-and-so was looking at me. Well, you know what? They're right. We can get rid of Christian later. So I'm going to get them. And then it all starts to maneuver. And that's where I think, you know, if Nick can calm himself and get back into, like, thinking critically about this game, like, he's still got a really good shot at doing well. If he maintains this thing of being hell-bent on Christian, that may be where he ends up being the one to target, where other people are coming up with another idea, and he is just like, no, Christian only, I'm still mad at him. And they're like, well, what if we just get rid of that so we can maneuver the way that we want? You know, instead of just doing what this guy wants, you know, so he can say that he got rid of the, you know, Mason to his Dixon or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why obviously this episode is critical for a lot of people, but because of how Nick handled himself, he maintains that he's going to put himself in danger of not being able to be worked with if he's so one track.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a risk. And, you know, Christian is in a tough spot right now, having been identified as such a big threat a little sooner than might have been perfectly ideal. And so in that sense, it's possible that maybe making the move by taking out Carl maybe was an episode too early, possibly. But, you know, that's not a mistake so much as hindsight is 2020.
Yep.
And in this context, you know, it's always going to be hard as you approach the end of the game. It's hard for everybody. That's just the nature of Survivor, especially when you have a season like this one, where there's actually a number of pretty good people left still on the show right now. And, you know, it's also true that Christian is not totally on his own, because even if Davey's just using him as a shield, helped him this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got about 30 seconds into the episode recap. So let's jump. We got the loved ones visit. So we got Davy's mom saying he's always been an explorer. He's Davy Crockett. That was fun. The whole thing of like he's always bringing in frogs from outside and stuff like that. That's good stuff. And then later he was telling her about her expression of dismay when he talked about catching the octopus was amusing. Of just like, oh. Then we had Allison's mom, and Allison was talking about being on Survivor's like the family dream. They're all fans. We had Kara's brother, and there's a little discussion about the, you know, the sibling relationship. And I'll say I had totally forgotten Kara was still on the show. It just because it's been an episode or two since I feel like she really had a significant role. I was trying to remember what she had done in the last couple of episodes, and I was kind of spacing it.
I thought, wasn't she part of the Carl thing?
I mean, I think she helped, but I guess I
thought she initiated that to begin with because she didn't want to do.
You might be right. Let me, skip back to look at my notes. I was not remembering that, even if it's true. It may be true.
Yeah, exactly. Which doesn't take away from the point, but it's,
Yeah. Let's see. You know what I have here is in my notes from last episode. Alec and Allison discuss Carl as the leader of the Davids, think he could maybe be blindsided. They bring in Mike, who likes the idea. Kara is on board. So I think...
No, but then she later, like, she was on board in the conversation with them, but then she left and was not on board. But I don't remember if she initiated.
That note that I read is the one that's right before Tribal Council.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure she's done stuff, but I'll say that I personally forgot what she
voted for Carl.
Yeah, no, I think she was in on that group for sure. But in any event, she hadn't been one of the prime movers in a little while, I feel like. Or that's what it felt like to me, whether that's true or not. We had Nick's dad in the discussion of the little boy comes out, which was more interesting when it was the first time and not as much when Probst tried to say essentially like he's just using the same phrasing for Gabby, I think. Like back to back, it was like just the little kid comes out. I don't know why. Never mind. I guess it's not a big deal, but
since so many people had their mother, you know, like up until like actually all the way through Angelina, it was either a mother and a father, except for Kara's brother, but they were all blood relatives until Mike, and then Mike and Christian had their loved ones. Like not the other ones aren't loved ones, but
significant others.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Nick's dad, Gabby's mom, Angelina's mom. One thing about Gabby's mom and just the idea that Gabby has always been type A, or also like anxiety ridden, and calls her mom to calm herself down. It's like, yeah, okay, I could see that. Not as a criticism, but just like that sounds plausible. Angelina's mom, she's saying, I'm fighting just like you taught me. Angelina also, I was feeling when I was seeing her here that it's like, I feel like mostly what I remember from her recently is us just commenting on how every time she tries to make a move, it blows up in her face. Not even because it's a terrible move, but just because it's unfortunately slightly out of phase with the bigger waves happening.
Yeah, until this episode.
Yeah, that's true. And that's very true. She's kind of retaken the initiative in that regard.
Yep.
Her and Mike. And so Mike's boyfriend, I'm not sure. I had an interesting reaction to Mike's kind of little speech because, Probst, pokes him for a writer observation. And Mike essentially says fancy words to the effect of, it's easy to forget that these other people are actually human beings, but now seeing them with their loved ones reminds me. And it's one of those things where, like, on one level, oh yeah, that's sweet, but on the other level, it's like, oh yeah, I wasn't looking at you guys as human beings.
Yeah, where I thought though, where it was more poignant, like as you look at the thread of the episode, him pointing out that it's interesting that they have these relationships with other people back home that we aren't aware of, and how they respond to them. And then dovetailing into one of the things that triggers Gabby is to see Christian, the way that he behaves around Emily, and realizing like that's not that basically like she's not the only one who gets that treatment from him.
Right. Yeah.
That's how, that girls that he cares about who need comforting in certain situations, he is very good at comforting them. And so when she sees him comfort her in that same way that he's been comforting her, comforted Gabby, that all of a sudden clicks like, oh, wait a minute. Like that's you know, it's not only me, like I need to kind of like step out of this and like get back. And also like she sees it the other way is like, okay, like, you know, not that she referenced what Mike said, but his whole thing of like, we see these people as humans and then we come play the game. Well, Gabby was almost the other way in that she was too like close with Christian that she wasn't seeing the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of broke that wall for her, which prompted this move. And so that's why I thought Mike's speech was interesting, like in hindsight.
Yeah.
It is kind of what led Gabby, you know, in reverse, what led Gabby to get to where she was.
Right. And it's also true that it's a useful observation for us, the viewers, right? To remember that these people have actual lives at home. They are not only who they are on the show. They also have these other things.
Or as my wife who watched the show with me this week put it, is this just 10 minutes of people crying?
Yes.
Which is also what it is.
Yeah. Sometimes the loved ones also get, you know, messy with sand if they help with a challenge, but not this time.
Yeah, otherwise, no, that is, I was like,
yeah.
I mean, it's not how I normally describe it, but yes, that's pretty much what it's about is like the emotion behind those people that we've been watching compete. Yeah.
Well, and it's once per season. It's almost ritualistic at this point to have a segment where it's just emotional catharsis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so, yeah, we had Christian's girlfriend and a couple of different dynamics because we see him at first doing his whole shtick. You know, hey, let me introduce you to my new friend, Jeff, talking about his beard and everything. And it's interesting the way he phrases it later, which is that he was kind of trying to do what he could to not have her feel on the spot to say something if she was feeling nervous about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in any event, we met everybody's loved ones. The reward was BBQ on a barge, and I was highly amused that the barge in question was literally like a floating platform designed to look like a backyard with the white picket fence and fake grass and everything.
Yeah, that was
picnic
funny.
tables. That's very silly.
The only other note I had from the loved ones that I thought was amusing was when Gabby's mom is like, "You're too skinny." Like, such a mom thing. Like,
Yeah.
You know? I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. Well, and in this case, it's kind of like, yeah. I mean, not as a criticism, but as in like, yes, they've been starving.
Yes, that's what made it funny. Is it like it's an accurate observation, but yet like just so like motherly of like, you know, you need to be like, you shouldn't be that skinny or that, you know, whatever, you know, it was just, yeah. Like,
bring out a tray of lasagna or something.
Yeah.
So in any event, yeah, that was funny. So the challenge, it was interesting that it started with Angelina kind of dragging and Probst kind of calling out that she's moving kind of slow, and also that she is the only one who still hasn't had even a single reward. But then she and Nick take the lead and win. Yeah, it was kind of neat to see that.
That was fun.
Yeah. And so, as is typical, they get to pick some other people to go with them. I feel like the last couple of seasons, when they have these choices to make, we haven't seen as many of the downsides to this sort of decision. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we've talked about it in the past as this double-edged sword of having to choose and then people resent you or whatever. And I feel like we haven't seen that play out as much.
Well, yeah, and I think I don't even remember if I mentioned it earlier this season or if it was late last season, but one of the things that I think leads to that is that the observation I made a while ago is that what seems to be happening is that they are, you know, they're sort of moving towards, remember that whole voting block thing?
Mm-hmm.
But without calling attention to it and not like making it this thing. Like they are a little more transient in how they vote and relate. And so that makes this like less of a big deal because you're not like locked in with like who needs to go and who has to go.
Right.
You have sort of these tangential relationships across everybody.
You know, I think you're really onto something there. Like I wasn't following it at first where you're connecting it to the voting block thing, but I now that you've explained it, I think you're absolutely right. Is that without that steadfast alliance with an expectation of loyalty, you don't have, people obviously want to be picked, but there isn't that same level of feeling of betrayal when so-and-so doesn't get picked.
Right.
Interesting. I had not considered it that way. But so Nick says that he had made a promise to Davy, and so Davy gets to join in. And then Angelina chooses Mike, saying that he's always been by her side, which I thought was interesting because that certainly hadn't been my perception of Mike and Angelina's relationship. But hey.
Yeah, no, I thought that same thing too because they, voted. I guess they voted the same last. No, not last. No, last time they voted differently because she joined essentially. That she had joined the Davids and he hadn't. Even though he had been the one that had always been talking about it, he hadn't done it, and she did do that. So but again, perception is a lot of this. So just like we talked about with Kara, like she may have been the one to initiate the Carl thing, but none of them remember that. You don't remember that. I only sort of maybe remember that, and it may not even be right. But it's like the perception is Kara isn't doing much.
Yeah.
The perception is that to Angelina is that her and Mike are on the same page. Okay,
Yeah. And like up until recently, Davy hadn't been doing a lot. I mean, he was certainly doing great with the finding idols and clues and all of that and contributing in that way, but not necessarily as much in the strategy plotting until that big move, right? I guess, that's still 2 episodes ago, so I guess it's not like it's that recent. But what I was trying to get to is that he is definitely stepping up now, which is great because it's nice to see, we haven't had the confessionals with him where he's talked about it so much, but for him to be saying, it's a little too obvious that Christian might go, and my strategy has been to keep everybody's eye on him, and then I'm going to, I'm going to draft him and then come from behind right at the end, and use him as a shield, that sort of approach. I don't know how effectively, because the trick there is always, but how do you then eventually get out from behind the shield?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of drafting. Like, when do you make the move? When do you make the move? Because in true drafting, like the same thing. Like if you move too early, it doesn't like knock them out of the race, but they end up then drafting off of you.
Yeah.
And so like you have to be, your point is correct. But what I do like is Davey, he's handled himself really well in the way that he's been a part of the strategy. Like he has what he wants to do. He, and yeah, okay, we have to be cautious of what the end game is. But when they just proclaim we're the final 4 together, he doesn't. Yeah, he joins in, but he steps aside and says, I'm not in that desperate of a need for acceptance that I'm just going to be with these 4 people.
Right. It feels like I'm only being included in that promise because I happen to be the one who's here.
Right.
Whereas, it feels a little bit like it's you 3 and whoever else was on this challenge would get the same pitch.
Right. Which means to me that final 3 is you 3 and not me.
Yeah.
And And that's not what I'm playing for. So I'm going to be a little wary of this sort of proclamation. And then again, the idea that he tipped off Christian, but did not draw attention to the fact that he was the one that did it. I think he handled, however it all went down, which we discussed for a while. Ultimately, as far as we know right now, he gave Christian the information that ultimately led to, however it came out, Christian knowing that he needed to play his idol. As far as we know right now, no one knows that he's the reason why. And some of that has to do with Christian's, all of his, but
his antics about making it seem like he was really deciding just based on everybody's facial expressions, when that might have all been a bit of theater. In the sense of,
hesitate to call it theatrics, but
I think that's
a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that he might not have really been using that moment to get a final read on everybody. But I think that there is also an element of he does not want to blow up Davy's spot, in the sense of letting everybody know that Davy helped him.
Yeah, because the way Christian thinks, he's expecting to go back and maybe make reparations with Gabby and Nick. And if he
not with Gabby anymore, but
that's what I'm saying. Ahead of time,
right.
Let's say that he sort of thought this through when he's like, how am I going to kind of approach this if I need to confront everybody? Davy, I can't blow up because Davy's the one that told me, and I want to keep him in my alliance. Gabby, I might be able to make reparations with. Nick, I've tried, and maybe we're still together. Hey, we still have this kind of four over here, but if I blow up Davy, then, I got nothing. And so back to what we're talking about, to Davy's credit, he has a plan. And again, we may question how difficult it might be for him at the end game to kind of get out from under that and put himself as the front runner. But he has a plan, and he's actually executing it in a way that is not drawing attention. Like, he's doing enough that he has a case no matter what, but he's not being seen as a threat yet. And so I'll be curious as to why he becomes a name that's getting written down, or if it's just a red herring. Do they discover he's the reason why Christian knew, and that's what makes them want to target him? I don't know. But as of where we sit right now, Davy's done a pretty good job for what he thinks is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And is he right? We'll see.
Right.
I will also briefly just, I think it's maybe worth bringing up Allison a little bit, just because it wasn't that long ago that she got all teary with Christian and was saying, and I really want to work with you, but she pretty much jumped at the first opportunity to vote for him again.
To be fair, he also went to vote for her. So it was on both sides. It was sort of in the moment, we're just going to be civil and cordial to each other and make each other feel better, but we're not actually going to do this, Well,
I mean, the last vote, they worked together to take out Carl. But you're also right that he was planning to target her this time.
That was his initial target.
Yeah.
Which some of that may have been fueled by his, idea, wanting to get back with Nick more than wanting to stay with her. As opposed to she is really who I want to get rid of. He may have thought, hey, this is my best chance to show Nick, hey, no, I'm still on board with the plan. I just needed to take one deviation, which now I think everybody understands that those plans no longer matter.
Yeah. Well, I think Christian also just still thinks Allison is a serious threat, and I don't know that he's wrong.
And I don't think that she's wrong that he is.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we're all agreed that you and I and most of the people on the show still are agreed that Christian is a threat.
Yep.
But the biggest threat is still up in the air, and then of course he might pull some other trick out of his sleeve too. But so in any event, we have Gabby talking about her sort of realization that she needs to not be relying on Christian. She needs to play for herself. And so she pitches this whole idea of doing in the move. Everyone's kind of on, everyone that she mentions, which includes Allison and Kara, and they're on board. And that takes us to the immunity challenge. And as soon as I saw it, I said, yeah, no way this one goes for 5 hours.
Also,
and
Kara won this.
Yeah, my observation about her not having done anything was at the beginning of the episode, not the end.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
So she did win this one, and also she won it like a Terminator or something, because she's just like, everyone else is shaking and sweating, and she's just standing there like a marble statue. That's not a.
I think some of that has to do with, I mean, her job. I think, isn't she like a fitness instructor or something?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
So, I mean, I think, like, not that they do this.
But muscle control.
Yeah, lots of body control, especially if she does a lot of body weight type stuff, like just that sort of that connection to be able to do that, may just be more ingrained in her brain and muscle pattern than anybody else.
Yeah. We had a nice moment, a nice couple of moments where we have Angelina coaching Nick after the after the transition, and then like a couple of other people chiming in, and Christian's kind of looking over them, is like, yeah, well, so how am I doing? Well, and everyone's like, oh yeah, right. We shouldn't make it super obvious that we're trying to help anyone but Christian. Gabby's like, oh, well, it was just super obvious that he was about to go out. And I think it's because it was obviously an on the spot, oh, I just got called out sort of excuse, that in reality is, again, like,
Yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah. And then it was also really interesting just how that all worked, where we see the edit of Christian's shaking, and then Nick goes out. And then we have Allison and Angelina specifically observing that Kara is being too low too, but they don't want to say anything, which is also ironic, thinking just back that Kara actually wins.
Yep.
But Davy was the second to last there, and so it might be too that part of his whole, start to come out from behind the shield thing might be that he's better at challenges than had been previously thought. Because he's done pretty well in a few, I think, right? He's won at least one, right? He won the last one, I think.
Yeah, he did win the last one. And and he's been competitive in all of them, and he's found idols, and I mean, he's done a great job, but because of his sort of, flippant.
Yeah, it's kind of a goofy demeanor.
Demeanor. Like, he's kind of diminished his threat level, and this whole idea of, I'm going to keep leaving Christian in front of me. Like, again, like I said, I think he's playing really well for who he is and what he needs to do. It's how do you execute the rest of it, Right.
So, but yeah, so I think the more we've talked about it, the more I'm starting to think that Davy might actually have like a path to victory here, especially since Christian is in trouble for sure.
Yes.
But in any event, let's see. After the challenge, everyone is relieved that Christian didn't win. Allison feels good about that plan, but is also like, yeah, but I thought that a couple of times already. Gabby says it's time for her to make a move. This is where, Christian, consults with her, and we get the confessional from her, where I was really actually pretty impressed with her, of just saying, You know, he's been my friend. We've been allies through all of this. So it does make me sad to have to turn on him, but he doesn't want me to win. So it's the game. And so I have to do this. This is the right thing for my game. And I think she was right in that assessment. Yep. And she did the right things. It didn't work, but not because she made some huge error, but just because he's good and Davey helped him. And it's always a tricky thing when you have to rely on someone not playing an idol.
Yep.
Blind sides are tricky, especially when you've got a really savvy player like Christian is. And even still, he almost didn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, not that this hasn't been, you know, obvious in earlier seasons, but the addition of the hidden immunity idol that you can go and just work your way towards getting by being savvy and hunting and, you know, avoiding detection. And it was such a great addition to the game.
Yeah.
It's so good, you know, and to see how people have used it, leveraged it, how they've adjusted it. Like it's found its sweet spot, and it just keeps it fresh, you know?
Yeah. They keep introducing little wrinkles. Like sometimes it's a clue to the idol. Sometimes it's the idol. Sometimes it's these advantages. But the idea of having people risk leaving the social dynamics behind and be seen as leaving that behind in order to get a potential advantage, you know, it's all good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. So, yeah. I mean, I think I was going to say, since we covered most of the rest of it and we have very short time left, I wanted to just talk about, you mentioned Path to Victory, and honestly, I think everybody left has a path to victory.
I think so too. I think I would probably give the lowest odds to Kara and Angelina.
Yep.
But I think that there is a plausible, you know, even Angelina, because, you know, there was a few episodes ago where we were saying it seemed like hopeless, doomed. But I don't know that I feel that way anymore. People seem to have mostly forgotten about the things they were mad at.
Well, and I think that's almost part of her path to victory, is that if she's sitting at the end with the right people, you know, where it's not just an obvious, you know, because there are some obvious winners if they're at the end. But if she gets there with the right group of people, the idea of, I was doomed for so long. I made all these choices and nothing worked, but I kept making it. I outlasted, and then I turned it. You know, that's an argument.
Yeah,
you know, Allison,
definitely.
We know has one. Yeah, Christian, we know have one. We just talked about Davies. Kara, you know, again, same thing. Like she, you know, if she gets to the end with the right people and can say, hey, you know, I was with Dan and I knew that it was time to kind of cut ties with him, and then I won these immunities and I did that. I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
Mike's super likable. You know, Nick is likable and can make a good argument and has done a lot of the right things. He's done a lot of the same stuff as Christian, and then separated himself if he handles it correctly at the right time. You know, so path to victory for everybody, and that makes it exciting. There's nobody where you look at and you're like, that's just dead weight.
Well, you know? and it's been great to have really a whole back half of this season where there's really not anybody unlikable.
Nobody
unlikable,
one, and nobody who, again, like I said before, is dead weight. Like there's not just this person is likable, but they're just not that good. You know, Gabby was probably the closest thing to that, and she, you know, came out with authority on this episode, and you know, it ended up getting her sent home, but at least she like went out with a bang.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I have a conflict, which means we have to wrap things up a little abruptly. But Yeah, but what I want to also tell to everybody is, first of all, check out my website for links to my Extra Life game, which will be happening this Saturday and Sunday. I'm going to be running 24 hours of Dungeons and Dragons to benefit charity children's hospitals as part of Extra Life, and it's going to be awesome, and you can donate and all that good stuff. But I'm also, in 15 minutes, going to be on a show called Mythwits, which broadcasts on Facebook Live. And so if you want to watch me over there, you'd have to be watching this live in order to switch over right away. But even if not, you can catch the archive of that later. So that's why we're wrapping up right now. But in the meantime, we'll be back for more Survivor next week.
Yes.
Or, when we can arrange it.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.